All right, today's topic is access to fresh water. This is one of the big problems that we've got. We know that access is not equally distributed around the globe. It's not even equally distributed in California. 500,000 to 1 million people in our state do not have access to adequate clean water. We take it for granted. We think we live in the United States. Everyone's got clean water. Everyone has what they need. It's a kind of given right in our country, and that's not true. When we talk about not having adequate access to clean water, it's not that we don't have water that's coming out of our pipes everywhere. It's that the water that's coming out of our pipes isn't clean water. I'm not going to show the video just because we need to make up those couple of minutes from setting up our lab. But when we talk about this, the video shows in Hesperia, in our high desert, local right here, they turn on the tap and the water that comes out is brown. That's a problem with the filtration system at the mobile home park where these people live. We know from the video that y'all were watching on Monday that in Midland, Texas, they turn on their tap and the water that's coming out has the chemical that's causing cancer. We know in Flint, Michigan, they turn on the tap and their water is polluted. So it's not that we don't have a tap to turn on, it's that what we are getting is not clean. When we talk about Hesperia and we talk about Midland, Texas, and we talk about Flint, Michigan, what's the commonality as far as class? They're low. It's low socioeconomic in our country that doesn't have adequate access to fresh water. So these are the people that don't have the money to hire a lawyer. They don't have the money to hire chemists. They don't have the money to kind of fight the fact that what they've got is not something that they can drink or that they can brush their teeth with. You don't get change until you have activists that come in. So in the movie in Midland, Texas, you have Erin Brockovich come in with her law firm. In Central California, in Hesperia, you have the news that comes in and publicizes this so that you can have people who have money that are going to get interested and are going to fight it. Same thing in Flint, Michigan. When we talk about our country in inadequate access to fresh water, it is our socially, economically depressed people, the people that don't have the resources to complain about what they're getting. But globally, it is also a problem. 1.1 billion people live without adequate drinking water, and 2.6 billion people live without adequate sanitation. That goes hand in hand. So if you don't have fresh water, you don't have a way of flushing away your waste, because we use water to do that. If you don't have fresh water, you don't have a way of washing your hands after you go to the bathroom. That's a problem, because we know that human waste is linked to disease. And so we need fresh water to be disease free. 1.8 billion people die every year from diarrhea diseases. These are usually diseases of the stomach, of the intestine, which spread through inadequate sanitation. So not having access to a bathroom, not having access to running water to wash your hands. Yeah.
Is it 1.8 billion people?
Yeah.
That die every year?
Yeah. 3,900 children a day. So when we talk about population growth, think about what it would be if everyone had access to all of what they need. Right? We still have more people dying than more people being born, but a lot of people dying at the same time. A lot of this is because in parts of the world, you go to the bathroom in the same stream that you're getting your drinking water from, or your cooking water from. These are not good things. Thank you. 260 river basins are shared by more than one country with no adequate discussion about how this water is going to be shared. Why is that a problem? There's not enough water to go around. Yeah. Yeah, each country now can have a different standard for what they're putting in their water as far as pollution and human waste and polluting that water. if I've got the water first and you have it downstream, do I really care what that water looks like downstream? Not necessarily. How about tragedy of the commons? We're all trying to use a shared resource that there's not a lot of. What's going on right now between India and Pakistan? One river, and when the country that has first access to that river doesn't get along with the other country, like India and Pakistan, India dammed the river and said, oh well, too bad, so sad, you no longer get water for your people. This is a problem. This is why we have to have written agreements in place when we share a shared resource. The WHO, which is the World Health Organization, that's one of the acronyms that you need to know, states that you need a minimum of 20 liters of water every day. That is the water that you're going to use to drink. You guys probably drink 2 liters of liquid a day. So your Hydro Flask is 1 liter. You probably go through that, but then you also probably have a Coke or a coffee or something else. So you probably only drink 2 of that. Then you need water to cook with. You need water to wash your hands with. You need water to shower with. Minimum required to be a happy, healthy individual is 20 liters of fresh water a day. When we talk about the 5 water-rich countries, we talk about Brazil, Russia, Canada, the United States, and Indonesia. And our 5 water-poor countries, Kuwait, Barbados, Bermuda, Bahrain, and the Central African Republic. What do our 5 water-rich countries have in common? What happens there on almost a daily basis somewhere in that country? It rains. So they are getting their fresh water from the sky on almost a daily basis. How about our 5 water-poor countries? They're kind of all desert countries. So they don't have that water coming from the sky. So they've got to get their water from somewhere else. You're going to use water to drink, to wash, to clean. That's your domestic uses. That's what you are personally seeing that water for. We know from our video that manufacturing and mining use a lot of water. Remember that little segment where they're showing how much water it takes to make a shirt? There's all of that hidden or embedded water that goes into it. We're going to use water for hydroelectric generation. All of the electricity in Las Vegas comes out of Hoover Dam. So it's water just moving through that dam system. We're going to use water for transportation. Almost everything you are wearing and using right now came from another country, and almost all of that came over in shipping containers on the oceans. That is still the most cost-effective way to move goods around the world. And we're going to use water to mark the boundaries of nation states. 2 sides of our country are bounded by ocean. Our southern border is bounded by what river? The Rio Grande. So we are going to use rivers to denote the edges of our nations. US and Japan are the 2 most water-intensive countries. We use about 350 liters a day individually within the United States. A good majority of that is those nice long showers you take at night. It's leaving the water running while you're brushing your teeth or washing your dishes. In Europe, they're a little bit more conservative in their water use, 200 liters, 20 liters or less in sub-Saharan Africa. %70 of our water is used for agriculture. And it's not used equally. Now, we still need this 70% to go to agriculture. Don't think this is where we could scrimp and save. This is important because we all want to eat. So we have to grow our crops, we have to grow our animals. We cannot say, oh, forget it, we're only going to use 50%. We still need to use this. But look at your diet and where the water is going. Wheat takes 1,000 liters of water to grow. That's like your bread. Rice, 1,400 liters. But your hamburger, 13,000 liters. Where is all of that water going in raising a cow? It's going in the crops. So I have to grow crop to feed my cow, which means I need water to do it. And I'm not butchering my cow for like a year. So I have to feed it for like a year. And it has to drink for like a year. And there's water used in just having cows. I have to like hose down my cows occasionally. I have to hose down my barn where it's shitting. I have to use water for the growing of my cow. Now, it doesn't mean I have to become a vegetarian. I could eat chicken and use 3,900 liters of water in the raising of that chicken. So I can save 10,000 liters by just switching my meat source. Something to consider. Water is often diverted for non-domestic use. Remember, domestic use is what you are using personally in your house. This water diversion is often for agriculture. As our population increases, so does our demand for food and therefore our demand for water for agriculture. And it is important that we have water for agriculture. Egypt, which is a desert country for the most part, has no water, right? They don't have water to use for agriculture. And because of this, they have to import 100% of their food. What's the problem with being a country that is food insecure, where you're having to import that much? It's the same with the rivers. They get a lot of food from the United States. What if we get pissed with Egypt? We take away our food supply. And now those people don't have food to eat. And you've got starvation and famine because you can't get along with another country. This is the risk of not being self-sufficient. There are 4 different ways that we're going to irrigate our crops. The first one is furrow irrigation. This is what we see with our strawberry crops in Southern California, where they're kind of planted up on berms, and between each berm is a ditch. You turn on a tap at the end of the ditch and you flood that entire ditch of water. The water moves laterally from the ditch into the roots of the strawberries. What are the problems with this? How are we wasting water through furrow irrigation? A lot of it evaporates. We live in Southern California. We're growing strawberries. It's 90 degrees, 100 degrees out. That water is evaporating before it can go to the roots. And then the other one I heard goes into the groundwater. So yeah, some of the water is going this way to the roots of the strawberry plant. A lot of it's just going straight down. And so it's not actually hitting our crop that we want. Flood irrigation is kind of like furrow irrigation, but now you're flooding your entire orchard. We see this a lot with trees. The almond orchards from the movie where the guy was cutting out his almond trees. Almonds are water intensive because they use flood irrigation. Again, they turn on a tap and they flood their entire orchard. You lose a lot of water to evaporation. Now, last period someone said, why is flood irrigation more efficient than furrow irrigation? Because with flood irrigation, we're usually doing it in orchards with trees, and so the root system is more extensive, and so you're going to capture the water more that way. And because you've got the trees, they're shading where that water is, and so you have a little bit less evaporation. Spray irrigation you're going to see in the Central Valley or in the Midwest. It's what this is right here in the picture. You essentially have a sprinkler system up high on wheels, and you're going to use it for like corn or oats or alfalfa, something that is planted really close together and is like a grass. This system will roll over the course of the day over your entire field, spraying that field. It's pretty efficient. Where it loses its efficiency, if the wind is blowing, the wind's going to blow the water off the crops. The most efficient is drip irrigation. This is what we've gone to a lot in our residential homes, where you have a thin pipe that goes out, and then at each plant you have a little hole and the water drips out of that little hole directly onto the plant and therefore directly to the roots of that plant. More than 95% efficient. So why isn't it more widespread? It's more labor intensive to lay out, because now instead of just turning on a tap, you have to have someone who lays all of this pipe work to every single one of your plants. And the equipment itself is expensive. So now you're paying for someone to do it and you're paying for the equipment. If you have something like an orchard, you lay it out once, a one-time big expense, and then it's just having, you know, your ground crew occasionally go through for maintenance. If you have something like strawberries where you're tearing that crop out 3 times, 4 times a year, then it becomes really labor intensive and almost too expensive to justify the cost. Hydroponic is kind of the wave of the future. Hydroponic, you grow it indoors, you grow it vertically, and you grow it with no soil. So the roots are directly in the water, and I can feed the nutrients into that water, and the water is recirculated, so I'm not losing water except for the growth of the plant. The other benefit to hydroponic is what's been going on with our romaine lettuce 2 or 3 times a year. Disease, E. coli. Where does the E. coli come from? Cows, poop, but not just cows, it's also deer or anything else that could be running through your field of lettuce. If you grow hydroponically, you can then control what has access to your crop, and you don't get that poop on your lettuce, and therefore you don't get E. coli. But it's expensive. Fresh water has 2 main sources. One is surface water. So that's your streams, your rivers, your lakes. The other one is underground, that's your aquifers. An aquifer is a contained body of water. Water infiltrates through porous layers of rock, so it kind of seeps down through the rock, and then gets stuck. And it gets stuck because there's clay, or there's granite, or some type of rock that isn't porous. And it kind of backfills into an underground lake. These recharge at a very slow rate. So once you pull the water out of it, if you pull it out very quickly, it's not going to replenish. It's not going to come back.
Let's begin by looking at the origins of groundwater. As rain falls on the surface, a small amount of it seeps into the earth, passing through porous layers of rock. Water can also migrate downward more quickly through cracks, crevices, and sinkholes.
All right, so if you look at the image, this layer of rock is porous. It's probably sandstone, and so the water can kind of find its Could we have issues? Definitely. We are going to alter the availability of fresh water by making the water go where we want it to go. And one of the ways we're going to do that is by building levees and dikes. A levee and a dike are the same thing. The difference is levee is fresh water, dike is salt water. It's a way of holding back the river. And so if I want to build my city right next to the river because land's at a premium, I'm going to have a levee. Essentially, I'm going to build the banks of the river up higher so that if there's snow melt, if there's a lot of rain, and that river kind of goes higher in height of water, it's not going to end up in my city. The problem is most of the levees and the dikes in this country were built with the CCC back in the 1930s, which means we're getting to almost 100 years old for all of this stuff. It's starting to crumble. Most of this was made with mud and dirt and concrete, things that don't have an extended lifespan. When we look at the break in a levee, which is what this picture is showing, all of that water then rushes out and floods the low-lying area next to it. Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, that was devastating. The loss of life was not because of the hurricane. The loss of life is because that city lies below sea level, and the city was built using dikes to hold back that ocean water. A huge storm surge came in, like a big wave essentially, and it ruptured these dikes because they're all almost 100 years old. You then had massive flooding up to like the second story of buildings in New Orleans. What class of people were devastated by that lack of infrastructure? The lower working class, the poor, socioeconomically challenged people. It's because they didn't have the money to evacuate when that hurricane was coming, and they didn't have the money to reinforce the levees in their neighborhoods. So when we talk about the problems with access to fresh water, the problems with our levees, the problems with our infrastructure, it hits the poor socioeconomic first, whether it be the poor socioeconomic in our country or globally. They're the ones who are hit first. We have a ton of levees in California. I'm going to show you just a quick clip of it.
An extensive inspection of California's levees raising questions tonight about the standard of maintenance of the levees across our area.
There's a concern of under seepage through sanding materials under the levee.
Sacramento is the most at-risk metropolitan area for flooding.
Yeah, it is going, and look at the water just raging, and that is heading towards homes.
We build dams across our rivers, and we build them to generate hydroelectricity like Hoover Dam. We build them to make reservoirs so that we have access to a body of fresh water to get our drinking water from, like Lake Mead. And we do it to prevent seasonal flooding, so they can control the flow of water down the Colorado River so that the communities that have built up along that river are never flooded out during an intense rainstorm. One of the problems with dams and why there is this whole counterculture in Oregon where people in the middle of the night go and blow up dams, highly illegal, don't get involved in that, but it's a movement, is because it impedes fish migration. There are a lot of fish that start in the ocean and have to migrate upstream to have their babies, the most tasty of which being salmon. They have to get to the other side of the dam. Small dams, that's it, the fish are stopped. Larger dams, we've built something called fish ladders. So this is a dam on the Columbia River, and you can see that it kind of mimics normal fish behavior. As they swim upstream, they're going to hit low spots where they're going to have to like jump over. Same thing here, it makes them jump up and over the dam in small little pools. And then when they get to the top of the dam, they go single file through the dam. The reason why they're going single file, it's a way that we can get population counts. There is a marine biologist who's got 4 or 6 years of education that sits in the dam and counts every fish that swims by and what species it is. This is a job that you too could have. That's why I'm a teacher. So that's one of the ways that we're getting around it. Not all the fish make it up and over. Less fish make it up and over than if the dam wasn't there. So that's one of the downsides of dams. Aqueducts is another way that we are moving water around. New York and California have the 2 largest aqueduct systems. In California, there are 2 main systems. One coming from Northern California, from the Sacramento Delta, down into Southern California. That's where we get our water. So the 2 water districts that your home could be hooked up to are getting its water from Sacramento. The other is the Colorado aqueduct that's coming in from the Colorado River in Arizona. This is our aqueduct. This one's coming down by Magic Mountain along the 5 and the 14 freeways. But I'm going to show you a video about the Colorado one. Note that the older aqueducts have 55% of their water lost to seepage and evaporation. Seepage is that they are concrete river channels, and as there's cracks that develop, water seeps out.
It has been called one of the world's engineering.
In the type of desalination that you're doing, the condensation base, you have to heat the water. You're going to use fossil fuels to do that. There's also reverse osmosis, where you pass it through a membrane. The water can go through the salt can. One of the problems is, what do you do with all the salt? It's not the same table salt that you're using. It's not clean. You can't really just dump it back in the ocean because concentrated salt like that will kill the wildlife. So this is one of the downsides of desalination other than the fossil fuel use. Countries are doing it. Japan does it the most. And then our desert countries next, like Algeria, Saudi Arabia, and Oman. In California, we have 2 desalination plants that are built but are currently inactive. One on Catalina Island and one in Santa Barbara. They are maintained so they can be turned on if needed. Like if we go into extreme drought and all of a sudden now there's not enough water for the people, we can turn these on. But they're not being run because they're expensive, and again, the ecological cost. What do you do with all the salt? There is talks of building one in Dana Point, right outside Dana Point Harbor. So that's where the next one might pop up. But again, if we have 2 that we're not running, why would we invest the money in building a 3rd? And so whether or not that one actually happens, we'll see. Cone of depression is an area where there is no longer groundwater. That we have pumped so much water out from the aquifers that the ground above actually sinks. And we're seeing it in satellite pictures of California, and we're seeing it in more like realistic views in like homes actually sinking into the ground.
This morning, California is facing a different kind of emergency. The state's water crisis is impacting one of the world's most important farming regions, the San Joaquin Valley. The ground is literally sinking by up to 1 foot a year. Ben Tracy shows us how the land is becoming as unstable as the water supply.
Every 6 weeks, Michelle Sneed visits this white shed. She checks the pulley system and records
A salt body of water like the ocean. Generally, because you've got this whole thing of fresh water, it keeps the salt water out of that aquifer. But as soon as you create space in that aquifer, the salt water comes in and backfills. Once you have the salt water come in and backfill, it's no longer drinkable fresh water. Not only that, you can't irrigate your crops with it because most of your crops can't handle salt being sprayed on them. So what are our issues with fresh water? First one's climate change. So as the climate is changing, our patterns of water distribution are changing. Areas that used to get water are now going into drought and vice versa. We have an increased population with an increased demand on agriculture, and so we are pulling water faster than it can replenish. We are slowing the flow of river by pulling water out of it, which means all of the sediment that would normally get washed downstream is building up in one location. We're using our aquifers. We are contaminating our bodies of water with fertilizer, and we've got poor irrigation practices. How would we remedy these problems? The first one is reservoirs. That doesn't work in California. We don't have land to build reservoirs anymore. Land is at a premium. We could build desalination plants, but again, they are costly and they create an ecological problem with what do we do with the salt. Rainwater harvesting systems is where we've kind of gone in California, where we're asking you to have gutters and rain catchments and then using that water for irrigation. And artificially recharging our aquifers. If you live in Northern California, Yorba Linda, Orange, those areas, they're getting their water from an aquifer that is underneath those cities. But again, as you pull water out, it doesn't recharge fast enough. The rivers that are above that aquifer, so over by Anaheim Stadium, along the 91 freeway, you'll see that they have bulldozers in there during the dry season and they're building up berms in the riverbed. They're doing that so that when it does rain, when those rivers are flowing, that the flow of the river has been slowed down. The longer you can keep the water over the aquifer, the more it will recharge the aquifer. The other thing that we are doing in Northern Orange County is we're taking your clear, clean sewer water. So the water that is normally just released out into the rivers, that is clean enough to drink, but it's got a little bit of a stigma to it, and we are pumping it into the aquifers to recharge those aquifers. We're asking you to reduce your domestic use of fresh water. In California, we've changed a lot of our crops. We've changed a lot of our landscaping. So most of you guys probably have artificial turf in your backyard if you've got lawns. You've changed out your plants for native plants. So instead of having a pine tree in your front yard, now you've got like sage and the stuff that, hey, can survive on just the amount of water that California natively gets. We are changing our irrigation. If you still have plants in your yard, you're probably irrigating them through drip irrigation. And we're reducing our pollution. Just an FYI, we have 3 classifications of water. If you have an RV or a motorhome, you've got 3 tanks on your motorhome. One is your freshwater tank. This is the water that you can drink. Then you've got a gray water tank. Gray water is all of the water that's going down your drains, in your sinks, and in your showers. It's not like poopy, but it's not drinkable. The third is black water. Black water is coming out of your toilets. The idea is that we could have gray water systems where you collect that gray water and then use it for irrigation. That's where I'm going to end today. After your FRQ tomorrow, I'll show you these videos. Your FRQ tomorrow, by the way, is not on water. It's on one of the previous chapters. Just a little FYI. That's it. You all can pack it in for today.
Thank you.